Let's see, we're going on to item number 4, energy market economics, Texas regulatory framework, and customer costs for power supply and circuitry. And then item 5 is the winter storm event updates. Both of these were related to our work to assess and be briefed on response to Winter Storm Uri.
Good afternoon.
This portion is a continuation of the topic items that I had requested from March 3rd. Go ahead. Thanks.
Yes, good afternoon, council members. My name is Erica Bierschbach. I'm Vice President of Energy Market Operations and Resource Planning, and I'd like to walk through several slides that speak to our energy markets economics, as well as a high-level description of the regulatory framework supporting it. I'm just going to turn off my video while I go through these slides, as it makes the transmission a little bit more clean. But we'll turn back on when I'm done. If you could go to the next slide, please. In 2002, the state deregulated the electric industry in Texas except for transmission. The Public Utility Commission, or PUC for short, oversees the electric market structure. It adopts rules addressing the market and can reverse rules adopted by the ERCOT board. The PUC has authority over ERCOT's finances, budget, and operations, with Texas legislature oversight. The ERCOT board is comprised of 16 members established by law. This composition is currently under review by the state legislature. Next slide, please. So what about ERCOT? It's the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. It was founded in 1970. With the legislature enacting laws governing ERCOT activities. ERCOT is a nonprofit with members from 7 market segments, and they're listed here before you: consumers, co-ops, independent generators, independent reps, retail electric providers, IOUs, and then our segment, which are the municipals, or the municipal utilities. Next slide, please. So ERCOT's purpose really comes down to 4 responsibilities. The primary responsibility being reliability. System reliability, or balancing supply and demand, generation and load, is done by, among other things, maintaining the grid at 60 hertz continuously every minute of every day. In addition, ERCOT is the financial conduit that settles all wholesale market activity for all market participants and for all wholesale products, settling prices for thousands of nodes across the state in order to price supply and price demand on the system every 5 minutes. ERCOT's responsible for facilitating the retail switching process that gives customer choice in deregulated retail markets, and they also provide an open access to transmission for development. Next slide, please. So let's look at some ERCOT mechanics. Austin Energy's customers have invested in generation. Austin Energy must offer that generation into the ERCOT market for it to dispatch. The city's generation competes with all the other generation in the wholesale market. Our generation does not supply our load. The power our customers use is purchased from ERCOT at our load zone. Next slide, please. So how do market participants like AE take part in ERCOT? AE does not self-supply its generation to its customers. It cannot do so. We cannot do so. The ERCOT market is a nodal market which requires supply, or generation, and demand, or load, to be either injected or pulled from the grid at specific nodes for that energy to be valued or priced accordingly. AE's participation in the ERCOT market is not optional. To serve our load and utilize our generation assets, we must engage in ERCOT's infrastructure. Our customers' generation competes in ERCOT's deregulated wholesale market along with all the other generation in the market. All of those other market segments you saw listed in a previous slide. Austin's market segment is the municipal segment. We are a non-opt-in entity, or a NOE, which means we have not opted into retail competition. We compete in the wholesale market, but not in the retail market. So we are a load-serving entity. We have an obligation to serve our customers, and in order to fulfill that commitment, we must purchase all of our customers' power from the grid, which is the ERCOT market. and we purchase that power at Austin's load zone, at our load zone price, which settles every 15 minutes. Austin customers have also invested in generation. Therefore, AE is a generator in ERCOT's wholesale market. We offer our units into the market. These units, all types, renewables, conventional generation, compete against each other through a process of offer curves and economic dispatch. If and when we are selected, we're told how much the market will buy and what value the market is placing on that energy through the settlement price it receives at its location. Our generation does not serve our load. None of it does. But it does benefit our load by providing a physical hedge in the wholesale market. So how did this serve us during the winter event, and how was our portfolio prepared for it? Next slide, please. This graph represents all the available generation Austin Energy had for the market from February 11th to February 19th, as well as a few purchases we made in the color brown for further protection. Please note that this slide is different than a previous slide shown to Council earlier this month, which looks similar to this one. The graph shown previously only depicted the amount of generation that was produced from Austin Energy's generating assets. This graph shows the entire amount of generation available in our fleet during the event. In other words, this graph shows you the portfolio's supply or capacity during the event. The graph shows generation in excess of forecasted load. It also shows that the excess generation was not due to load shed. There was generation in our fleet that did not completely dispatch, and that was for several reasons. I'm going to walk through those reasons. Before ERCOT entered EEA on Monday the 15th and began to shed load in the early morning hours, gas prices had already been trading very high over the weekend due to freeze-offs and supply disruptions in the West. Although prices at night over the weekend were in the thousands, when normally they are in the teens, they did not get high enough to bring on all of our generation. This was before load shed. This is reason number one for us not being at full dispatch, even in these high prices. Reason number two, as a load-serving entity who is 4% of the market, we are required to provide a specific amount of ancillary services to the market. Ancillary services are the reliability products necessary to support the transmission of electric power from generators to consumers. Austin Energy typically carries or ties up most of these ancillary services on our generating units, as opposed to buying them from the market. This served our customers well because these requirements were costing the market 2.5 times the price of energy when energy was at the $9,000 cap. And finally, reason number three, there were many hours while ERCOT was trying to maintain stability on the network and bring load back onto the system that a portion of our generation units were sitting at the bottom, waiting for direction from ERCOT to bring our units back up to meet demand, a delicate balance. Austin Energy's generation and positions were well in excess of our forecasted load. We, along with other generators, suffered trips, but for most of the event, it wasn't load shed that positioned us financially. It was that we had generation for a market that was in severe short supply. Can you go to the next slide, please? So Austin Energy has been managing the price risk in our customers' portfolio for quite some time. Our hedging program has oversight, a competitive process for acquiring assets, a diversified portfolio, and an active portfolio management philosophy, which has served our community well. Can you go to the next slide, please? Austin Energy, this is a snapshot of how your portfolio is diversified throughout the state. By selecting projects in different regions, we decrease dependence on a specific region and increase probability of expected output. Can you go to the next slide, please? Austin Energy's hedging program began managing the natural gas price risk in the fuel charge when the volatility in that market, the natural gas market, created much uncertainty for our customers. Our fuel charge is now the power supply adjustment, or the PSA, and we manage the price risk inherent in this charge. The power supply adjustment is a pass-through and does not contribute to the general fund's transfer. This includes the nodal price risk around our load zone costs and where our consumers demand power, as well as our resources, where our resources inject power, the congestion on the network, fuel price risk, and transportation of those fuels. Next slide, please. If there are no questions, I'd like to pass the baton to Austin Energy's Director of Enterprise-Wide Risk Management, who will speak to you about the PSA in more depth. Thank you so much for your time and attention today.
Thank you, Ms. Bierbach. Any questions here for Erica? All right, let's move on to the next section.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Adam McEnroy, and I'm Austin Energy's Finance Director for Risk and Settlements. It's my pleasure to speak to you today to provide some further detail on how the energy markets Erica has described become part of our customers' finances through our billing and our power supply adjustment. Next slide, please. So the energy markets Erica has described today create power supply costs and revenues for Austin Energy. And these are passed through to customers on a dollar-for-dollar basis through the power supply adjustment charge on customer bills. PSA cash flows encompass costs and revenues from our wholesale power market activities on behalf of our customers. And the largest components of these, as Erica laid out, are purchases for customer usage or load, sales into the market from our generation fleet, and purchases for fuel and renewable energy for that fleet. Next slide, please. So on a daily basis, these PSA cost components are fast-moving and dynamic, with features of sub-hourly price movements, seasonal market environments with distinct dynamics, multiple related markets from electricity to reserves to fuels to renewable resources. And throughout these markets, there's an hourly dependence on Texas's complex weather. So a key focus of Austin Energy's operational and financial procedures is to mitigate this dynamism, to offer customers stable and affordable rates. To do this, the utility uses its diversified portfolio, as Erica described, of physical generation resources, a thorough suite of risk management activities, and financial policies and cash management from the organization's own funds to help provide customers an annual PSA rate with measured changes from year to year. Next slide, please. So customers eventually experience energy market costs as monthly PSA charges. These are collected as a pass-through charge, levied on per kilowatt hour on customer bills. The rate for these charges is set once per year and is determined so that it recovers net energy market costs across the full system and over the 12 months of the rate year. The PSA charge is a one-to-one dollar-for-dollar pass-through of the net energy market costs per kilowatt hour. In particular, where our customers' generation portfolio earns revenue from sales, that revenue offsets costs dollar for dollar as well. So in particular, there is no general fund transfer applied to PSA costs or revenues. The PSA charge currently accounts for roughly 31% of residential customer bills, with other key billing components being base rates and regulatory charges. Next slide, please. So the PSA rate is adjusted once per year, and it is determined so that it collects the net costs for market activity over 1 year, as estimated at the time of rate setting. The rate is also set so that it returns or collects any non-zero PSA balance held by the utility on customers' behalf at the time of rate setting. Daily and monthly movements in power supply settlements are managed by Austin Energy's funds, and short-term changes do not immediately impact customer bills. There is a mechanism by which, if the balance in the utility's PSA accounts becomes larger than 10% of an annual PSA amount, Austin Energy works with council to adjust the PSA rate off-cycle to begin to return the balance or collect the deficit from customers over the following 12 months. Next slide, please. So Austin Energy's cash and liquidity balances help manage the daily settlements in the energy markets so that Austin Energy can transact in these fast-moving daily markets while still offering customers rates that are collected monthly, set annually, and that experience measured changes. Utilities across Texas use their own financial resources similarly on behalf of their customers. After the winter event, these liquidity balances and general financial health came to be items of keen concern for bondholders and ratings agencies who evaluate the ability of utilities to remain financially sound and to make timely payments on their bond obligations. Throughout February's winter event, Austin Energy's own cash balances remained healthy, giving support to the stable rates we offer to our customers. Next slide, please. So because Austin Energy and the City of Austin participate in the bond markets, the utility has taken on obligations to make bondholders aware of significant financial events and risks. To meet this obligation after the winter event, Austin Energy and City of Austin Treasury made a financial disclosure to the bond market on March 8th. The disclosure described the weather event and updated bondholders on Austin Energy's financial position during and after the event. As key points of the disclosure, Austin Energy and Treasury communicated that Austin Energy's cash liquidity position remained strong throughout the event and afterwards, that during the event, Austin Energy supplied generation and reserves in excess of load to the ERCOT market, and that because of this, we estimate that wholesale market revenue will offset all market costs from the event when all the costs are settled in their final form. We also disclosed an important caveat that settlements for all activity during that week are not yet complete and many uncertainties remain. In the disclosure, we noted that some of those uncertainties have the potential to change Austin Energy's customers' economics from a net revenue position to a net cost position for the event. Next slide, please. So to conclude for today on the PSA, Austin Energy manages dynamic daily energy markets to provide stable, affordable, and annually set PSA rates to customers. PSA charges and revenues are passed through to customers in full with no general fund transfer. By using its own liquidity on customers' behalf, the utility must occasionally give guidance to bond markets on its financial health. And Austin Energy is financially healthy after the winter event, and we look forward to continuing to offer stable rates for our customers going forward. With that, I'll pause there. I'm happy to answer any questions or turn to Tom Pierpoint for our next topic.
Any questions? And then Mr. Pierpont, we want to I want to be able to hand this meeting over to our friends with Austin Water Oversight at about 3:30. Do you think we'll be able to fit into that time frame, Mr. Pierpont, on the load shed?
I don't see why not. I can move pretty quickly. It's only one slide. Of
Thank you so much.
course.
Fire away.
All right, thanks. I'm going to talk about load shed. In all utilities, the generation and the load have to remain in balance, basically at all times. Load shed in the context of ERCOT is a process where we shut off customer load to maintain that balance. And that load shed is only done through ERCOT. Would never be called by Austin Energy. When ERCOT goes into a load shed situation, our share at Austin Energy is provided to us, and we put it in a control center system. We enter the amount in, and the system has an automated program that starts rotating through feeders to get down to the needed level. And just talking about feeders real quick, each feeder are feeding to the substation, so we're turning off the feeder at the substation. Feeders can generally serve thousands of customers and also across many different communities. It's also important to point out that the feeders in the list may or may not be available if they're serving critical loads or they're used for under frequency protection. The second point with this is that the load shed list at Austin Energy was designed to be to allow a lot of rotation and result in relatively short shutoffs for customers. Unfortunately, on the days that ERCOT called for reductions, they were so deep that they consumed really most of the load shed list and prevented any rotation. So for the automated rotating list, we're looking into potential ways to power critical load while others recycle. And many of these points have been brought up by various stakeholders. This could include segmenting, sectionalizing, or even reconfiguring feeders where feasible. One of the things that was brought up today and has been brought up in multiple forms is the possibility of using automated metering type solutions for individual shutoffs while other customers stay up. Austin Energy is exploring this with the vendor. There are some hurdles that have to be overcome. This includes the communications and the capabilities of meters to actually turn off load or not. And then another after actions item is we're looking at resources from the Electrical Power Research Institute, to look at ways we could better do load shed in the future. There's also other types of load shed besides the rotating list. This is mostly comprised of larger commercial industrial customers, and those customers simply can't be cycled. There's no way to turn them on, turn them off. It just doesn't work. So right now we have to closely coordinate with the large C&I customers via phone to have them ramp down and shut off. And this is required to ensure safety at their facilities and prevent damage. Our after actions for the C&I customers is we want to work with ERCOT and C&I customers to develop a more automated program that helps us meet load shed requirements, but also helps them manage their facilities at the same time. And so that is it on load shed. If there's any questions?
All right. Any questions for Mr. Pierpoint? Yes, Councilmember Tovo.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Pierpoint. I have a series of questions about this because I think this is the question that we're asked the most, really, with relationship to the winter storm. Can you walk me back? I'm sorry, I didn't pull up my presentation, so I'm going to have to do that since you just took that that one slide down. Can you talk a little bit about how the original circuits were designed and why there are residential customers on those circuits in addition to some of the critical functions like hospitals?
Sure, it's just a function of the feeder, and how it was laid out there. It's entirely possible that there's hospitals and residential customers on the same feeder. It's just how the system was constructed over the years, so they can be intermixed, and that goes back to in the slide looking at the after actions. The first point is looking at ways that we might further segment, out hospitals, for instance, maybe put them on a dedicated feeder. In some cases, Westlake Medical Center might be an example, and then separate the critical load from the rest of the feeder.
And so, one of the questions that I know our general manager addressed during a press conference was, again, a question that we've been asked a lot by our constituents. If Austin Energy has the ability to shut off my power if I don't pay my bill, why couldn't they have used that mechanism during this situation to, in essence, take down residential customers who were not serving critical functions who had power during that period of time? I know she explained that wasn't possible, but the answer was pretty technical. And so I would ask if you could just explain why wasn't it possible to take down some of the customers who were residential customers or non-critical businesses that were on a critical circuit so that you could have brought up other?
Well, a couple answers is we are going to further look into that, but for a lot of in a lot of cases, the AMI system is not there yet. We actually shut off customers, send a truck roll, so that the meter actually gets pulled. And then the second part to it is for automated meters, the communications. So we're talking tens of thousands of devices, and the networks for automated meters aren't designed for that kind of throughput. So sending out tens of thousands of commands, if you will, through these networks to AMI meters is something we're going to have to look at the design. I mean, the short answer is the communication systems weren't designed for that kind of crushing input. Now, having said that, we are exploring it with the vendor. I mean, we are taking this request seriously.
But just why it wasn't feasible during the storm? Sorry?
Yeah,
why it wasn't feasible during the storm is because in a lot of cases there aren't automatic meters. You would have needed to send out a truck, which obviously wasn't efficient.
Yes.
Or possible. And then for those where there are automated meters, the system at this point is not designed to have done the volume that you would have needed for that to even have made a difference in terms of allowing you enough leverage to bring back other customers, given the depth of the load shed.
Exactly, and sending all those commands out to shut them off, and then making sure that we could send all those commands back out again to turn them all back on. That's
Mr.
something we'd have to be rock solid on.
Thank you so much, and we really appreciate it. And this is good information. It may be useful for us to get that explanation in a memo too. I'd love to send that out by way of my newsletter.
Sure.
And I think everybody else would appreciate that as well. I'm going to move us now all together. We're still having the joint meeting over to the Austin Water Oversight Committee, and at 3:33 I'm going to adjourn the Austin Energy Utility Oversight Committee and pass the gavel on to the chair, Chair Kitchen with Austin Water Oversight, to continue the conversation on all of these topics.
Thank you, Chair Poole. I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Water Oversight Committee as part of the Austin Energy Joint Meeting at 3:33. Today, just to lay out what we're doing here with Austin Water, we have a hard stop at 4:30. So we have a follow-up presentation from Austin Water, follow-up for our meeting that we had, I believe it was March 3rd, the last meeting that we had. So today what we're going to do is our staff is going to talk to us about the financial relief achieved to date, about Austin Water's resilience efforts, and further updates that we began last time on winter storm demand analysis. And also, I just want to let everybody know that the next meeting, so we have an hour today, and we appreciate Chair Poole for letting us be part of this joint meeting of Austin Energy. The next meeting of Austin Water will be on April 19th. That will be a regular meeting of Austin Water. At that meeting, we'll be able to drill down into more detail on infrastructure and communication